Okay, welcome everybody again to another City REI Monthly MeetUp. I already asked you guys to sign in with the QR code. So if you haven't done it yet, then I'll put it back up at the end of the meeting. We want to thank Navigator Tap Room because they've been graciously letting us host here the last Sunday of every month. So let's support them by keeping your glasses full, grabbing a drink. And then, so this month is a little bit different because we are actually the ones that are going to be presenting to you guys. We wanted to present how we were able to recently close on a house with seller financing. And so we're going to get started.
Okay, so about our meetup, we started this back in 2020 with Chris and Angela. And we have Ben helping out, but he's actually sick at the moment. Yeah. But we wanted to start this so we could network with like-minded individuals.
Mm-hmm. A little bit about us. We're both full-time W-2 employees. We self-manage all of our properties. Last year's goal was we were looking for a deal, but interest rates rose and nothing is penciling out. And so we were looking for ways to buy. And we decided to stray from conventional financing and kind of learn about creative deals. And we finally were able to close on a deal this past January.
All right, so we'll talk about what is seller financing. It's when the seller finances a portion or all of the sale of the property with clearly defined terms. So 3 of the common types are lease options, where the buyer leases the property, the title essentially doesn't transfer to them. And at the end of the lease term, the buyer has the option to purchase it. And number 2 is subject to. Title transfers to the buyer, subject to the continued performance of the seller's mortgage, and that loan stays in the seller's name. So we have contract for deed, also known as a land contract or installment sale. This is what we're going to be talking about today. So that's a contract stating you must make payments until paid in full before the deed is transferred to you. So you could kind of compare it to financing a purchase of a car. You don't get the title until it's fully paid. So the seller cannot have a mortgage in place if you're going to do seller financing as well.
So it's important to note that the due on sale clause can be triggered with lease options or the subject to deals. So know your risks and protect your investment. These are just a few types of seller financing. And even within these 3 types, there's so like a million different nuances or variations that you can do within them. And we just don't have enough time to cover every single one. So why would someone want to do seller financing? For the buyer, you can negotiate endless terms. Literally everything is negotiable. You can potentially have lower costs or fees because you don't have like origination costs from a traditional lender. And if you're unable to qualify for the loan, or perhaps the building just doesn't qualify for conventional financing, this is an avenue that you can take.
Now, benefits for the seller, if the property is distressed or mismanaged, they can have the buyer put in the work instead. There's also tax advantages. The seller will pay taxes only on the profit that they receive and can spread out their capital gains over several years. Again, this is not financial advice. You should always consult your CPA. But together, sellers and buyers can negotiate both price and terms and create a win-win situation for everyone.
So about our most recent acquisition. So this is us actually in the brand new house. It was a month after our son was born. It was for sale by owner. It was a single family home. It was listed previously as a rental, and it is in DuPage County. We're not sharing your address because this is going on YouTube, but you guys want to come over and talk to us? Yeah, come be friends.
Fine. We'll talk about it. All right. So the steps that we took, the approach, first off was education, building the team. Second is goal setting, then finding the deal, negotiating, the due diligence and closing, and then at the end, there's a few key takeaways. So in regards to education, we networked, attended meetups, listened to podcasts. Listen to podcasts, seminars. Cash Flow Depot is pretty good too. That's got a lot of resources and attorneys, CPAs.
Mm-hmm. So we actually consulted both of our attorney and our CPA before we started looking for a deal. We wanted to let them know what our plan was. We wanted to kind of see if they had any feedback, anything that we needed to take into consideration. And so that they were prepared that when we found a deal, they're all ready to jump on board and not like have to research or do whatever they need to do to prepare. So even with all of this preparation, we didn't go into it blindly. When we were doing it, we still felt like we had no idea what was happening. Absolutely nothing. It's daunting, but you just got to dive in sometimes. It's good to know though that creative financing has been around for a very, very long time. It has fallen out of favor because for the past 40 years, we've had super cheap money. But if you look back on history, go back a little bit further than 40 years, you'll see that these people have been getting deals done like this for a long time. And so that's kind of what we did, especially with Cash Flow Depot, the people on their wealth of knowledge. And this was like maybe 30, 40 years ago. And so don't go trying to reinvent the wheel. It's important to remember that even though history might not repeat itself, it will rhyme. And so look back.
All right, so we had two main goals. Initially, we were just trying to grow our rental portfolio. That's when we found out that April was pregnant. After it was actually one of our meetups, like
it was after one of our meetups.
Like back in May,
not feeling so well, and I was like, this is weird. And then it was literally right after the meetup we found out we were pregnant.
Yeah. So after that, like suddenly our goals shifted. We no longer want to do the house hacking, but we still wanted to continue investing in real estate. So we kind of have two buckets of having a primary residence and also getting a real estate investment.
So our buy box. For our primary residence, what we were looking for was a single family home in a desirable area. Ideally listed as a for sale by owner and bonus points if it was previously a rental. That's because the seller would already be familiar with being a landlord, or even better, they'd be tired of being a landlord. They were wanting to get additional monthly income, and we didn't have to explain all of the benefits of seller financing to them upfront. These owners were looking to sell. They needed to sell their home. They were typically not investors, and most of the time they had really large sentimental feelings about their home.
Nice. So for the real estate investment side, we were looking at multifamily units, 10 units or less in areas that we already had rentals in. And our criteria, we were looking for off-market, not held in an LLC with high equity. And the end goal being we're looking for long-time owners. With those owners, they have an investor mindset, right? Not like a house and
a homeowner.
Yeah. A homeowner, right? So the purpose was to learn how they were able to acquire their properties. So we had two very different types of owners. So with the target approach, we pulled lists, and pulling a list is simply gathering properties that fit your criteria. Tried a few different ones. I can't say that there's a best one. You just need to try them for yourself. Some of them have like free trials. PopWire is just free, which is pretty cool. And then for Zillow, there's a tab that you can just click on if you want for sale by owner. Okay, for skip tracing, there's a couple websites listed on there too. You could pay for skip tracing. It's just finding owner contact information. But honestly, I feel like there's free resources online that yield the same results.
The same exact results.
Yeah. Up there is Netter Online. That one's pretty cool. It's a directory that has all the links to all the public records, like your tax assessor, treasurer, and recorder's offices in the entire US. So even properties in LLCs, you can find the owner contact info. You're not safe, okay, guys? You can just go into the Illinois Business Entity search and type in that LLC. And a lot of the times what we saw, the property owner is listed there as either an agent or a manager.
And then we would take that name and then skip trace it.
Right.
So going back, more often than not, we found that the LLCs were kind of owned by people who had more and more and more properties. And we really wanted to talk to kind of smaller mom and pop ones. And that's why we eliminated LLCs. But those were our buy boxes, our criteria. You should make your own.
Okay, moving on to the hardest part for me, picking up the phone and dialing. Sometimes, man, that phone feels like lifting up a brick. But it's important to know that when you first start making phone calls, you're going to suck. Okay, you will sound cringy, but you'll eventually get better. You just got to keep at it.
Yeah, we practice our elevator pitch to each other a lot. here was an example of mine, and this is what we said on the phone, believe it or not. My name is April. I'm calling because I came across your building at blank, and I actually am local to the area. I own a building there. I've been trying to build my portfolio so I can eventually support my family with my real estate. And I wanted to ask you a few questions on how you bought your building, and how have you been able to successfully run it for so long? I'd love to connect. My name is April. My phone number is blank. So even when it was not a voicemail, that's kind of the pathway that I was trying to take.
Yeah, like for me, that's okay. Ring, ring. Hi, my name is Julian. My wife and I are newly married and just found out that we were pregnant. We're looking for a place to fit our growing family and are interested in learning more about your home. So that's pretty much like the script that we use.
Mm-hmm.
So the purpose for calling multifamily owners was primarily to build relationships, and the single family homeowners, that was really to find their true motivation for selling. We didn't put seller financing as the purposes for the call. This really helped remove pressure off of us. It allowed us to be authentic, focus on the relationship and not just the transaction. And honestly, we treated it as practice, talking with these people.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, we weren't rushing to get into a deal because nothing was working. We wanted to be patient until we found the right deal. And we had a lot on our plate because I was pregnant. So we were just calling whenever we could after work, holding each other accountable. And actually, this strategy is inspired by Cody Davis, who does all of his deals seller finance.
All right, so money isn't everything. You know, you need to find their true motivation, and you may need to ask more probing questions because they're not always going to say it outright. In our experience with the multifamily owners, they already had their guard up. We were probably like their millionth call from other people trying to buy their building. And so sometimes it kind of disarmed them when they would say, I'm not selling. And we'd come back and like, well, I'm not buying. People would love to talk about themselves and tell their story. It was pretty awesome to have someone who was angry, let their guard down, lighten up, and just because someone wanted to learn from them. Although, we often got hung up on, got yelled at, or couldn't even get a hold of them. Getting used to no and getting those reps in was really good. Mm-hmm. So some of the questions are on there. How did your journey in real estate start? How did you become successful at buying this type of property? Do you have any advice for someone who's just getting started? What would you do differently knowing what you know now? And that just kind of opens up everything.
The questions I like to ask the single family home FSBO, the for sale by owner listings, was, we're about to start a family and we love your home. Why would you sell a beautiful home like this? And it kind of allowed them to steer it into any direction that they wanted, whether it be something that happened with their family, a situation, financial. It just opens it up for them to put whatever they wanted out on the table. What do you love most about this area? Why didn't you list it with an agent? So emotional equity is super powerful. When you spend the time to build the relationship with someone, you've talked with them over the phone several times, maybe you've met in person several times. Trying to start all over again with another buyer is emotionally draining for them. Would probably be like, oh, well, I got to do all of this again. I already spoke with them so many times. And so that is a really powerful piece in this.
Right. So meet in person if possible. It makes you tangible and memorable, kind of puts a face to the voice. It's also important to remain authentic and genuine. People can tell when you're lying or being disingenuous.
Sometimes you even can sneak in some mind tricks on them and assign them some positive attributes that they will subconsciously want to live up to. Like, oh, you've been so generous with your time, or thank you for being so helpful, or your story was so inspiring. It makes them want to live up to those expectations. And, while speaking with them, make sure you try and find some common ground. Try and have them see a little bit of themselves in your journey. And it just makes you more relatable.
All right. So for the multifamily owners, building rapport means you'll be top of mind if they eventually want to sell. And if they don't, you found someone who's more experienced than you that could kind of help guide you.
It's a win-win. So after numerous phone calls, we found a single family owner that we clicked with immediately. We went through the steps. We told them our story. We listened to them. They loved the fact that a family was going to be living there. And during our walkthrough, the seller had asked, well, how long have you guys been looking for a home? And I said, we've been looking for a long time. I go, it's been really difficult for us because interest rates are so high. And then she paused for a moment and she said, you know, I think we'd be willing to play bank. And I was like, oh my God. But because of that rapport that we built, they really wanted us to buy their home. It was no longer just a strictly financial transaction. All of a sudden, she wanted that vision of, oh my God, this family's going to come in here and they're going to love this home just as much as I did. And it became more. It was not just, oh, I'm going to not sell to her, I'm going to sell to her. And then what happened next was months long of back and forth until we finally agreed on a deal. Price and terms. So price can be a very, very sensitive point for owners. Sellers want to feel good. They don't want to have to tell their mom, their dad, their brother, their sister, their neighbors that I had to sell my home for less than it was worth or than less than I paid for. Nobody wants to feel like they lost. So with these seller financing deals, don't be afraid to pay if they're asking or even overpay a little bit if you can negotiate on other terms. The price is actually the least important and the weakest negotiating point. It is something that you can give them very, very easily.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting because as we were walking through this property, through the home, it was obviously beautiful, but it needed some updating. But it's kind of funny, they ended up negotiating themselves down just by allowing them to kind of talk through the property. And like, oh, this needs coat of paint, this needs patching up. And further along in the inspections or negotiations, we showed them estimates of the rehab work that needed to get done, and that definitely reduced the price further.
So if you're able to give them on the price, make sure you take on terms. It can be possible to make a deal work if you give them a higher offer or a higher purchase price by negotiating maybe an interest-only period or maybe even a lower interest rate. In this specific case, the seller already knew that the interest rates were super high and we weren't willing to pay that. And we eventually were able to secure a 4.5% interest rate.
So also the seller was looking for a 25 to 30% down. And we tried to get creative with them as well. We tried to offer equity in our other properties as collateral to secure the loan. It didn't work in this situation, but because of the rapport that we built and they knew we would be putting money into the home for the rehab, they agreed on a lower 15% down payment. So you need to remember that the seller's biggest worry is you not performing. So giving them that peace of mind, extremely important.
We ended up being able to secure a 5-year loan term with an option to extend if market conditions are not favorable. And our loan is amortized over 30 years. And then we realized during our initial conversations, even on the phone during the showing, that they had a lot of sentimental feelings about this home. We really realized it when they said, you know, we had a lot of offers to tear down the building just for the land so that they could develop it into a bigger home, and they flat out refused it. They told us how they raised their kids in that home, and they told us how they were still close to all of the neighbors in that area. And so we showed them that we would love this home, that we were going to raise our family there, that this is probably going to be our forever home. And then we negotiated on everything else. And I don't even think they knew that that was the most important thing to them. To them, they wanted, you know, purchase price. For them, they're thinking they're being smart, they're being logical. But you could tell what their true feelings are, even though they're not outrightly saying. So it's super important to be listening.
All right, the fun part, contract review. We reviewed that contract, like literally line by line with our attorney multiple times, just making sure that the price was correct, the terms were all there. We said this already, but we negotiated and were able to get like a term extension built into the contract. We also tried to negotiate a third-party loan servicing company to essentially handle the loan. This is when an independent company will keep track of all the payments and transactions, kind of like a mortgage company.
So I really didn't know of any third-party loan servicing companies. And so I was asking around. I asked at this meetup, I think. I asked online. And one that kept getting recommended to me was someone called Madison Loan Servicing Company. It's a reputable company. I looked it up. I called, inquired, and their pricing is super reasonable. It was insane. I thought it was going to be much more. Their boarding fee to set up the loan get all the documents from both sides, is $150. And then every month after that to service it was $25. It's like almost like, it's like Spotify. Spotify, you could afford this. Give or take $10 if you wanted to include taxes and insurance. And so to us, we're like, this is a no-brainer. We told the seller, this is a great thing. We would be willing to pay for this upfront because it kind of protects our payments. It protects them as well because they don't need to keep records of anything. They flat out refused. I don't know. I have no idea why. But I guess you have to pick and choose your battles. But this meant we needed to be extra diligent with our record keeping. Because if they're not keeping track of payments and they say, hey, you haven't made a payment, they could, yeah. And so what we ended up doing was opening up an entire bank account just for this property.
So we learned that the homeowner's insurance must be the seller's policy since they technically own the house still. We requested copies of the policy to make sure that it had adequate coverage and is a landlord policy. We also worked with an insurance broker to get quotes and see if the policy was adequate. Then we obtained renter's insurance policies just to protect our own assets.
During our inspection, we also noticed that while all of the mechanicals were functioning, they were older. And so I actually talked with one of our real estate agent friends, Samantha Gagny, or Samantha Magante, shout her out. And she was saying, you know, sometimes you can try and negotiate a home warranty in lieu of paying them upfront, even though the mechanicals are still working, because that doesn't make sense. So the owners were willing to fund a home warranty policy for the first year. And that's great because literally our AC went out yesterday, the hottest day of the week, and it was terrible. But we have someone coming out Tuesday from the warranty company. Crazy. And we are also responsible for paying the taxes, but in our contract, it's that we pay the seller, they hold it in escrow, and then they will pay the county directly. That's another thing that we'll have to double check just to, you know, trust but verify that they're actually paying the taxes.
So just like a regular home purchase, you should perform your own appraisal and homeowner's inspection. In addition to this, we got quotes for repairs and CapEx.
Mm-hmm. So by the time the closing had happened, we had been to the home over 5 times. We brought contractors there, brought our family there. And I almost didn't request a final walkthrough because it was like super cold. It was the dead of winter. I'd have to call and coordinate like everyone to show up there to open the door. But I went with my better judgment and I was just like, let's just get a final walkthrough. So we went there. It happened to be after one of the more colder days in winter. And we went in, we turned on all the water, and we found a waterfall in the basement the day of closing. And so had we not done that, we would have been responsible for that repair. And because we did the final walkthrough, we were able to get the seller to agree to pay for any of the damage and repairs that had cost. So the steps are there. You know, people say what to do for a reason. These are the steps to take for a reason. Do the final walkthrough. Do not skip it.
Just because you can do seller financing doesn't always mean that you should. You know, we spoke to a few lenders before closing, and we wanted to ensure that we can qualify conventionally for a mortgage at the current interest rates. We also wanted peace of mind that this was the best financing for this purchase. In terms of our exit, we had the ability to extend just in case the market wasn't favorable. We could sell the home or we could refi into a conventional mortgage. All right, so final thoughts and lessons learned. We saw the property, in June?
June of last year.
June 2023, mm-hmm. And we didn't close till February 2024.
Mm-hmm. A week before I had my baby.
Yeah. So that was partly because we're trying to be accommodating to the seller's schedule and they're traveling a bunch. But had we had specified a sooner move-in date, we might have been able to close sooner.
So get everything in writing. Even though we had a lot of emails, there were still a lot of phone calls with the seller where we had a lot of verbal agreements and verbal communications. This caused a lot of stuff to be omitted from the contract that we had agreed upon. So get everything in writing and it'll prevent delays and your attorney saying, my seller's not going to do that. Lots of stuff going on.
And have a great team. The seller informed us that his attorney was paid hourly. Our attorney up front, yeah. And our attorney is paid at the closing table. Their motivation to get the deal done was not as strong as ours. And you could totally tell, like, that attorney was dragging his feet.
I think he misspelled our name purposefully, like 4 or 5 times, just so that we can go back and say, hey, this name is still spelled wrong.
Yeah, there's like the littlest errors that they would put in there.
Yeah. So another point is, don't be afraid to get under contract. We had been calling people for several months, and we were kind of getting used to, okay, we got a phone call, it was great. But then when I hit it off with this seller, I was like, oh my God, what do I do now? Because we had never gotten to this point thus far. So when you hit it off, they're interested, they like you, you have a rapport, get it under contract. Don't delay, secure it, talk to your attorney, make sure you have the right contingencies in there so that you can exit if needed, but do not be afraid to get it under contract. That was something that we kind of delayed on, and I was like, what are we doing? We're wasting time. Another point is, there's a lot of times where we felt like the deal was not going to happen. Like from June to February, there were sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks that we didn't hear back from the attorney or the seller. And I was like, oh my God, it's not going to happen. But despite it all, every time that we sent a communication to them, we phrased it in a positive light. Like, I'm so excited to still be purchasing your home, this property. Let's keep the needle moving forward. What is next on our to-do list? Or we are coming so close to an agreement. What else can we do? So be collaborative and don't act like you're fighting against them. You have to be on the same team.
Okay, point 6 is how much work real estate agents do behind the scenes. There's a ton of behind the scenes work that they do, and they don't nearly get enough credit. Title company,
scheduling, showing,
coordinating with attorneys, like all that stuff.
And we had to do it all, and it was they don't get enough credit, your real estate agents.
They earn that commission.
And that was us a couple weeks after we gave birth in the new home.
Yes.
Do you guys have any questions?
Questions?
So our title, our contract is recorded on the title as an installment sale. Thus, we are paying the seller the taxes. It's in the contract. We're paying them the money for the taxes, and then they're paying the county direct. Once we either refinance out of the property or complete the sale. So Illinois mortgage, so that is one of the scariest parts of seller financing. They can default you on anything. And like if they say, oh, you have to maintain the lawn, they drive by, the lawn's not maintained, they can kick you out. But like those were when we said we went through the contract line by line, we went through that contract line by line. We made sure that if there was any sort of default or any sort of like repairs that needed to get done, we have 30 days to 40 days to complete. They cannot start anything within 30 to 40 days. Also, like the late payment fees, they can't charge us a late payment fee until it's been a month since we've started. And also the default for Illinois mortgage foreclosure law, anytime that there is a loan that is a private loan, if it's paid down to 80% equity, so they paid off 20% of the loan, they have to go through a foreclosure process. So that kind of gave us a little bit of peace of mind that, within like a year or two, we'll be able to get to that 80%. And they would still have to go through foreclosure. They can't just evict us off of a default. That was just to give us peace of mind. It was the first time we went into a property or a purchase like this, and we wanted to make sure, are we overpaying? Are we underpaying? We wanted to see where we stood. And so it just was something that we felt was prudent. I'm sure, if you get a couple more reps in and you're buying these properties and this area, it was our first time also buying a property in that area. And there were not a lot of comps in that area because the people live there for a long time. They never leave. And so it was just giving us peace of mind that, this is a good price. This is
right. And we didn't have to share that report with the sellers either.
Yes. Yes, it did.
It felt good.
It felt good. What's up, Sven?
All right,
Okay.
but obviously you're not dealing with writers. How do you get assessed? Profile your.
So, oh, that's a really good question. So he's asking, how do we get assessed if the bank isn't qualifying us? How is the seller?
Who's underwriting this?
Yeah, who's underwriting? So once we got to the point where, okay, yes, we are your buyers, you are our sellers, they vetted us like a tenant. They ran a credit and a background check, and they asked for pro forma, not actually pro formas, but they asked for a schedule of our real estate owned. And we wouldn't have been able to buy that property had we not had a portfolio of rentals. So honestly, we didn't know that question either. So what we did was we told our CPA, hey, is there anything that we need to be considerate of when we're buying a property like this? And honestly, he just said no. He said, you know, it depends. A lot of it is when it comes tax time is the seller has to make sure that he has the appropriate interest rate, that he's not going to be charging like this purchase is like a gift to you and then he's going to be taxed on it. But all of that is like the seller's responsibility. You can advise your seller to talk to their CPA as well. But this would just be another purchase of a home for him. Hi.
So instead that you have like some sort of memorandum or contract on title.
Correct.
Have you guys already kind of had that thing?
So
just to kind of prelude to some banks, federal property.
So yeah, we did. We talked with banks that pre-approved us for loans at the full purchase price, at the current interest rates. And then once we got that pre-approval, we thought to ourselves, okay, well, this is at the full purchase price. By the time we decide to refinance, the principal will be much lower. We'll be in a better position.
Right. They quoted us what, like 8 or 9% interest rate
yeah,
at the time?
Because it's such a large purchase. And then they said, we were thinking to ourselves, well, if interest rates are better and our principal balance is lower, we'd be okay. As long as the title is or your contract is recorded correctly. So an installment sale, once you get to the closing table, everything is signed, that document gets filed on the title at the recorder's office. You need to double check that that happens, because no one is going to be like, hey, we haven't done that yet. Because if that's not recorded correctly, when you go to refinance your home, it's going to go as a new purchase. They won't count that it will be a refinance. If it is recorded correctly, you'll be able to go to the bank and say, I want to refinance out of this loan. You would be able to take advantage of some of that equity that you've built up.
Question.
Oh.
First one is regards to taxes. So it sounds like the current homeowners.
Yeah, it's all within like, it's kind of all amortized into that one payment. Yeah. The bill? They are, because they're still the owners.
Mm-hmm.
Second question is, that's something we talk about here. That's there's some
Yeah.
not that we also want to take. That's what, how did you go about filtering out homes that you would actually?
I mean, honestly, when we were doing the for sale by owners, the list that we pulled, it wasn't that.
It was not long.
So okay, we'll call over here, over there. You know, it was like practice at first, and then once we found this one, we're like, oh, actually, this one.
It started
nice.
When we found the listing. It started all of a sudden dinging all the boxes. I was like, oh, for sale by owner, got it. Oh, previous rental, which wasn't with. I did not see it on Redfin. Actually looked it up on Zillow, and that's where I saw that it was a previous rental. So check all the sites. It's in a great school district. It's in an affluent neighborhood. It's in a safe neighborhood. It's in a neighborhood that, like I said, nobody moves from. So yeah, I don't know. It just happened to check all the boxes, and then
the timing was just there.
Yeah,
we got really fortunate with it.
And then we looked at it, and it was great. I don't know. I feel like this is like a once in a lifetime thing that it's going to happen. So hopefully this happens with our next one. That's going to be an investment property.
Yeah, it's crazy because you don't hear too much about seller financing. So we felt it was important to just kind of discuss how we got it done.
And that it is possible. Because honestly, when we started doing it, we're like, we're never going to get this done. It's like never going to happen. But we decided to just put in the work. Just try, put in the work, even if the same thing every day, one day it will be different. Any other questions? Well, thanks, guys.
Thank
Oh,
you.
wait, go ahead, Jim. Okay.
So, did you have a specific strategy for seller financing? In other words, you did give some criteria, so you were looking specifically for seller financing.
It's just when we structured the conversation, we didn't want that to be the focus. Is that your question, or?
Yeah, so typically, if you're looking for seller financing, you've either got a strategy, or if you don't have a specific strategy, you always reserve the opportunity for seller financing by always including a specific set of questions whenever you close a deal. So whether you were targeting seller financing or not, it's like, I want to make sure I ask the right questions, see if by chance this could be seller financing. And I can include some seller financing, if not all seller financing.
Well, I think it was, we were trying to kind of sneak in questions of trying to understand, did they own this home outright? Do they have a mortgage on here? We did a lot of research on the property as well to see if was it in default? Were there any liens? Was there any problems with the property? So when we couldn't find a mortgage on it, we couldn't find any liens on it. They kind of told us that they had been living there for a long time, but they kept it when they moved somewhere else. And so it'd been like 30, 40 years, must not have a mortgage. We assumed that they didn't have a mortgage, but obviously when the title search came, we knew that it was free and clear.
And you said you had two things that I think were super important. One of those was it was a rental. So this was a rental prior?
It was a rental prior, yeah.
So you know that they know they're a more educated.
Yeah.
They're not just a home.
They're not novice.
Right.
They're not green behind the ears.
They've
Yeah.
got some experience. Probably know what this is. They've probably been exposed to it before, even if they've never done it.
But for some reason, they couldn't let go of it because they loved it so much. Yeah.
I think the other is that it was for sale by owner. And I think that you have a lot of people in this arena that will tell you, whether it's your CPA, your attorney, or your realtor, no, you don't want to do seller financing.
Oh, everyone said that.
And
Everyone said that.
There's a lot of things that go behind that, whether it's actually good advice or not.
Right, exactly.
It's not always good. But if it were a realtor, there's a really good chance of realtors telling them, no, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I think the idea that you guys went for sale by owner, prior rental, were two of the real key components to being able to find this. Not the only way, but I think a very, very smart.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Oh, we got a couple more. I think, Eric, I saw your name. So we have that 5-year term. We'll probably start. So I think it's something important to keep in mind that you can't just do anything within these 5 years. You have to make sure that you are loanable by that time. So we can't just go and swoop up a bunch of properties. We have to make sure that we're keeping in mind we're going to be asking for a loan at like 3 or 4 years.
Like our debt to income.
Our debt to income, our credit scores, all of that. And if we have rental properties, we have to make sure that they're performing, because part of the vetting process, even when we were talking to banks, was they were looking at our entire income, including the income from our rental properties. And so, it's just being able to exit at the end, so refinancing.
Or we could sell too.
Or we could sell it. We could sell the property to somebody else who'd want to buy it if we can't find a loan. We felt very comfortable because this area is so desirable. It's adjacent to a beautiful nature center. It's a walking distance to the library. It's really great. Yes, go ahead, Chichi. Honestly, we wanted to practice negotiating skills.
The cold calling.
The cold calling. Like, we wanted to cold call. And we have a lot of friends who are realtors, and we just didn't want to be bothering because we know that, like, hey, can you put in an offer? Can you put in an offer? We just wanted to honestly practice talking to owners who are resistant and negative. We just wanted to practice. And we were so pregnant, we did not think that this was going to happen. Yeah. You know what? There was a couple of things that were super interesting when we were talking to them up front. So when we were during the first, when they said, "Oh, we'd be willing to play bank," they said, "Well, I remember the husband was saying, well, we have to get everything ironed out of the contract before we talk to the attorneys." So he was constantly saying, "I don't want to talk to my attorney yet. I don't want to talk to my attorney yet," because he was paid hourly. He wanted the contract to be said and done. We just hand it to the attorney, and all he has to do is draft it, and we sign. Because it's so expensive for him, I guess. And then I guess with the real estate agent, maybe he just didn't want to pay. They kind of skirted the question, like, "Oh, we have a friend here who can help us show it while we're out of town." But I think that they were just trying to save some money. I'm not sure.
Right, because they had it listed before.
They had it listed before.
But then they changed it to a rental.
Yeah. That was several years before.
Yeah. So maybe bad experience with the agent.
What's up? Against seller financing?
Yeah.
It's very risky. So, I mean, the due on sale, that's huge. You can lose all of the money that you've invested in the property. The default. So the reason why that Illinois mortgage foreclosure law went into place was because back prior, the 40 years before we had all the cheap money, a lot of people were doing rent to own, but in a very predatory style. So a lot of investors were buying up these homes. They were preying on very financially weak, maybe the minority, maybe they're immigrants who couldn't qualify for a loan, and they'll say, "Hey, rent to own, you can pay me rent, and then at the end you can purchase, or pay me rent and it'll pay down your property, and then you can qualify for a loan." Well, guess what? These people never qualified for a loan. They paid for an option purchase up front, so they paid for like kind of a down payment, and then plus they're paying rent. And then once they default, they didn't cut the lawn, they painted the windows the wrong color, they did something, they would kick them out of the home because it was in the contract. They got to keep all of the option money, and these people got taken advantage of. And so that's why there's Illinois has specific protections in place, especially if the seller is someone who does a deal like this more than 3 times a year. There are very strict regulations. If you're going into if I'm a seller and I'm going into a seller finance deal 3 times a year, I have to make sure I'm following all of these rules. This seller, though, had never done a seller financing deal. But the Illinois that 80% rule still applies to any loan. So, I mean, those are the reasons why there's a lot of negativity around seller financing, rent to own, AKA. Any other questions? Jim, one.
I felt like I seen one of the things where it was either had a lot of equity or paid off or whatever, which would indicate you have an older seller, which
Right.
I think is another key ingredient here.
Yeah.
This is not somebody who necessarily needs to get $20,000 to buy a new house,
Mm-hmm.
or they have to get a full purchase price paid all at once in order to move to another residence. So was that, or was that just my imagination?
100%. They might be looking for just cash flows. They're maybe tired landlords, so that was part of it.
Or they need that extra income.
And the rental used to income.
Mm-hmm. They're just tired of going there.
Right. So, I mean, we tried doing that with a multifamily owner that we met. We built a really good rapport with them.
And we were under contract with 2 properties at the same time as the single family property was another multifamily unit in Berwyn.
And, we tried multiple options. We didn't start right off the bat with, "Hey, will you seller finance this deal?" We give them multiple options. Like, this is what we could do with a bank conventionally, all cash,
Mm-hmm.
or, I mean, if you would do some seller financing.
And we were even asking him, "Can you do a portion seller financing and then the rest of the bank?" And then we even ran through the numbers with him, like, look at the cash flow. Like, literally it is negative, 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 negative. We want to work with you. That was something that we kept saying to them. That was another option, like the interest rates are too high. Something that you can say without directly saying seller financing is, "We are willing to work with you so that we can get this done. Let's work together to get this done," so that we can start thinking kind of out of the box. But he was we had a good rapport with him, but he really was so upset that he did not sell his building when people were in like 2020, 2021, when prices were super, super high.
Yeah,
He was so upset that he didn't sell it, and he just felt like he lost and he couldn't let it go. But he actually called us back after we had our baby. He called us back, but we haven't called him yet.
We'll see.
So
To be continued with that one.
We'll come back.
you guys are how many, and you actively wanted to practice
Mm-hmm.
this routine and sales pitch and
Yeah.
be comfortable on the phone. How many calls did you have in trying to secure this type of property, this type of deal?
For the commercial list, that was a bit longer.
Yeah, probably like,
We were trying to get to do at least like 2 a day or 3 a day. We wanted it small.
ease into it. But I think we had been doing that for several months before we found out we were pregnant. And then so maybe like 70 calls.
We targeted, like, the majority was Berwyn for the commercial, and there's a lot of multifamily there.
A lot of mom and pop owners there. But we made the calls, but how many people did we actually get to speak to? Maybe like 20 or 30. But we tried calling every single day. Just sometimes you can get a good number.
We left voicemails,
Oh, yeah.
and some lines are disconnected, so we tried it all.
So I think because there's no actual ownership of the property, I would have to double check. I don't
This is in a
remember.
trust.
So how about to us?
Oh, to us?
Yeah,
Not sure.
I'm not
If
sure.
it's in a trust, it's forever.
Forever.
So as long as you.
So it might be
are in
who our
contract-
heirs would be. So if probably, God forbid, something happens to us, that contract would transfer to our baby. Who would obviously the guardians of the baby, I guess.
Just to shift back to, like, I guess what happened. So this, for a couple of years, the seller had it on market,
Oh yeah.
off market, had its rental for however long.
And just a caveat, the guy who rented that house before us lives 3 houses down the street now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was telling us all the little nuances
Yeah.
about the house. It was kind of
Because he
cool.
loved the neighborhood so much. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
And then after, how long was it up?
Oh, okay. So we started looking around Mayish, and then, but it had been listed for sale since March. So it had been up for a while, but they lived out of state. And so they had sometimes their friends showing it for them, and it wasn't something they were super taking seriously. And I'm not sure, it just happened to all fall into place when we decided to look at it, or they were probably not vacationing at that time. But there are people I'm sure that were interested. And even during our negotiations, they would say, you know, we've had a lot of inquiries on this property if we haven't talked to them in 3 weeks. But yet we were still able to get it done.
All right.
Any other questions? Thank you guys so much
Yeah,
for
thank you
coming.
guys.
It means a lot to us. And we'd like to take a picture by the beer wall, and then you guys can network. Thank you again.